Imagine this. You've worked tirelessly for years, sacrificing time with your family, missing your child's school events, and pushing through sleepless nights, all to prove your worth in a job that barely acknowledges your existence. Now, picture being called into your boss's office on what seems like an ordinary Tuesday, only to be told that your services are no longer needed. No warning, no second chances, just a cold, dismissive handshake and a security escort to the door. This is exactly what happened to Sarah, a single mom of two who had dedicated 5 years of her life to a company that treated her as disposable. But here's the twist. This isn't just another story about corporate cruelty. This is a tale of resilience, revenge, and the unexpected ways life can turn the tables on those who think they hold all the power. If you've ever felt underestimated, undervalued, or pushed to the brink, this story is for you. Because by the end of it, you'll see how karma has a way of balancing the scales in the most jaw-dropping, satisfying ways imaginable. Let's rewind a bit. Sarah wasn't just any employee. She was the backbone of her department, the one who stayed late to meet deadlines, the one who trained new hires, and the one who always had a solution when problems arose. But her boss, Mr. Grayson, never saw her that way. To him, Sarah was just another cog in the machine, easily replaceable and unworthy of respect. He was the kind of man who thrived on power, the kind who believed his title made him untouchable. And when he decided to fire Sarah, he didn't just take away her job. He took away her sense of security, her ability to provide for her kids, and her faith in the system. But what Mr. Grayson didn't know was that Sarah wasn't going to take this lying down. She had a fire in her that no amount of corporate coldness could extinguish. And as the days turned into weeks, something extraordinary began to unfold, a series of events that would leave everyone questioning who the real victim was. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've heard stories like this before, bosses who abuse their power, employees who fight back, and karma that eventually comes knocking. But trust me, this isn't your typical revenge story. This is about the quiet strength of a single mom who refused to let her circumstances define her. It's about the small, seemingly insignificant moments that add up to something monumental. And it's about the shocking twist that no one, not even Sarah, saw coming. So, if you're ready to dive into a story that will make you cheer, gasp, and maybe even shed a tear, keep watching. Because by the end of this video, you'll not only get the answers you came for, but you'll also walk away with a renewed sense of hope and a reminder that no matter how dark things seem, the universe has a way of setting things right. Let's talk about Mr. Grayson for a moment. On the surface, he was the epitome of success, a sharp suit, a corner office, and a reputation for being a ruthless businessman. But beneath that polished exterior was a man driven by ego, insecurity, and a desperate need to control everything and everyone around him. He wasn't just arrogant, he was vindictive, the kind of person who took pleasure in others' misfortunes. And when he fired Sarah, he didn't just do it because of budget cuts or restructuring. He did it because he could. Because in his mind, he was untouchable. But what he didn't realize was that every action has a consequence, and his actions were about to set off a chain reaction that would leave him reeling. As for Sarah, she was the kind of person who always put others first. Her kids were her world, and she worked tirelessly to give them the life she never had. But being a single mom in a cutthroat corporate environment wasn't easy. She faced constant judgment, endless challenges, and the ever-present fear of losing it all. And when that fear became a reality, she could have given up. She could have let the weight of it all crush her. But instead, she chose to fight. Not with anger or bitterness, but with determination and grace. And as she navigated the aftermath of losing her job, she began to uncover secrets about Mr. Grayson, about the company, and about the people she thought she could trust. Secrets that would change everything. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending for you. But I will say this, what happens next will leave you speechless. It's a story of betrayal and redemption, of heartbreak and triumph, and of the incredible power of resilience. It's a reminder that no matter how hard life gets, there's always a way forward. And it's a testament to the fact that sometimes the people who seem the weakest are actually the strongest. So, if you're ready to see how this all unfolds, keep watching. Because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. And who knows? By the end of this video, you might just find yourself believing in karma a little more than you did before. But before we dive into the details, let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like the odds were stacked against you? Where you were pushed to your limit and didn't know how you were going to make it through? If so, then you're going to relate to Sarah on a whole different level. Because her story isn't just about revenge, it's about survival. It's about finding the strength to keep going when everything feels like it's falling apart. And it's about realizing that sometimes the best revenge is living well. So, whether you're here for the drama, the inspiration, or just a good old-fashioned tale of comeuppance, you're in the right place. Because this story has it all. As we move forward, I want you to keep something in mind. This isn't just a story about one woman's fight against a corrupt system. It's a story about all of us. It's about the battles we face, the obstacles we overcome, and the moments that define us. It's about the power of standing up for yourself, even when it feels like the whole world is against you. And it's about the unexpected ways life can surprise us when we least expect it. So, as you watch this video, I want you to think about your own life. Think about the times you've been knocked down and how you found the strength to get back up. Because that's what this story is really about, the resilience of the human spirit. Now, let's get back to Sarah. After losing her job, she was faced with a choice: give up or fight back. And fight back she did. But not in the way you might expect. She didn't storm into Mr. Grayson's office demanding justice. She didn't file a lawsuit or try to take down the company. Instead, she did something much more powerful. She focused on herself. She took the time to heal, to rebuild, and to rediscover her worth. And as she did, she began to see things more clearly. She began to see the cracks in Mr. Grayson's perfect facade. And she began to realize that sometimes the best way to win is to let karma do the work. But here's the thing about karma. It doesn't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it's subtle, almost imperceptible. Other times it's loud and undeniable. And in Sarah's case, it was both. Because as she began to piece her life back together, strange things started happening at the company. Whispers of misconduct, rumors of financial mismanagement, and a growing sense of unease among the employees. And then one day, the unthinkable happened. Mr. Grayson was called into a meeting with the board of directors. And when he walked out, he wasn't the same man who had fired Sarah just weeks before. He was shaken, defeated, and for the first time in his life, vulnerable. But that's just the beginning. Because what happens next is where the real story begins. It's where the lines between right and wrong blur, where the truth comes to light, and where Sarah's journey takes a turn that no one could have predicted. So, if you're ready to see how it all unfolds, keep watching. Because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. And who knows? By the end of this video, you might just find yourself believing in karma a little more than you did before. But for now, let's just say this. Sometimes the universe has a way of setting things right. And in Sarah's case, it did so in the most unexpected, satisfying way possible. So, stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. Sarah's life after being fired was anything but easy. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, frantic job applications, and the constant worry of how she would provide for her kids. She had always been a planner, someone who prided herself on being prepared for anything, but this was something she couldn't have planned for. The severance package she received was barely enough to cover a month's rent, and the job market was tougher than she had anticipated. Every rejection email felt like another blow, another reminder of how precarious her situation was. But Sarah wasn't one to wallow in self-pity. She had been through tough times before. Raising 2 kids on her own after her husband walked out had taught her resilience, and she wasn't about to let this setback define her. Instead, she channeled her energy into finding a way forward, even if it meant taking a job that was far beneath her skill level. She started working part-time at a local cafe, serving coffee and pastries to strangers who had no idea of the storm she was weathering. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't what she had envisioned for herself, but it paid the bills, and for now, that was enough. Meanwhile, back at the company she had once called home, things were beginning to unravel. The office, once a well-oiled machine, was now a hotbed of tension and unease. Employees who had once admired Mr. Grayson's confidence were starting to see it for what it really was: arrogance. Whispers of his questionable decisions began to circulate, and the once loyal staff started to question his leadership. There were rumors of financial discrepancies, of deals gone wrong, and of a growing rift between Mr. Grayson and the board of directors. But no one dared to speak up, at least not openly. After all, Mr. Grayson had a reputation for crushing anyone who opposed him, and no one wanted to be the next Sarah. Yet, despite the fear, there was a growing sense that something was about to give. The cracks in the foundation were becoming too big to ignore, and it was only a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down. As Sarah adjusted to her new reality, she found herself reflecting on her time at the company. She thought about the long hours, the missed birthdays, and the sacrifices she had made, all in the name of loyalty. She thought about the colleagues she had considered friends, the ones who had promised to stay in touch but had quickly disappeared after her departure. And she thought about Mr. Grayson, the man who had once seemed larger than life but now felt more like a cautionary tale. She couldn't help but wonder if there was more to her firing than met the eye. Had it really been about budget cuts, as he had claimed? Or was there something else at play, something darker, something personal? The more she thought about it, the more questions she had. And the more questions she had, the more determined she became to find the answers. It was around this time that Sarah began to notice strange things happening around her. Small things. At first, a missed phone call here, an unexpected email there, but enough to make her feel like she was being watched. She tried to brush it off, to tell herself it was just her imagination, but the feeling persisted. Then, one evening, as she was closing up the cafe, she received a text from an unknown number. The message was cryptic, just a single sentence: "You deserve to know the truth." Sarah stared at her phone, her heart racing. Who could have sent this? And what truth were they referring to? She thought about responding, about demanding answers, but something stopped her. A part of her was afraid of what she might uncover, of the Pandora's box she might be opening. But another part of her, the part that had always been curious, the part that refused to back down, knew she couldn't ignore it. She had to know. The next few days were a whirlwind of uncertainty. Sarah found herself jumping at every sound, scrutinizing every stranger who walked into the cafe and constantly checking her phone for another message. But none came. It was as if the sender had vanished into thin air, leaving her with more questions than answers. Then, just when she was starting to think it had all been a cruel joke, she received another text. This one was even more cryptic than the last. Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street. Midnight. Come alone. Sarah's mind raced. The old warehouse on 5th Street had been abandoned for years, a relic of the city's industrial past. What could possibly be waiting for her there? And more importantly, who? She knew it was risky, that going alone to a deserted location in the middle of the night was a terrible idea. But she also knew she couldn't ignore it. Whatever was waiting for her at that warehouse, it was connected to her firing, to Mr. Grayson, and to the life she had lost. And she needed to know the truth. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Sarah's anxiety grew. She thought about calling the police, about bringing someone with her, but something told her that wouldn't end well. Whoever had sent those texts wanted her alone, and if she wanted answers, she would have to play by their rules. So, with a deep breath and a silent prayer, she made her way to the warehouse. The streets were eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows and crumbling walls casting long shadows in the moonlight. Sarah's heart pounded as she approached the entrance, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She pushed open the heavy door, the creak of the hinges sending a shiver down her spine. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. The only light came from a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting an eerie glow over the room. And there, in the center of the room, stood a figure she recognized. It was one of her former colleagues, someone she had once considered a friend. But the person standing before her now was a far cry from the cheerful, supportive co-workers she remembered. They looked nervous, almost scared, as if they were waiting for something or someone to happen. Sarah took a step forward, her voice trembling as she asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "What's going on? Why did you bring me here?" The figure hesitated, their eyes darting around the room as if they were afraid of being overheard. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, they said the words that would change everything. "It wasn't just about the budget cuts, Sarah. Mr. Grayson had a reason for firing you. A reason he didn't want anyone to know. And if you want to find out what it is, you're going to have to dig deeper than you ever have before." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process what she had just heard. What reason could Mr. Grayson possibly have for firing her? And why had this person risked so much to tell her? Before she could ask any more questions, the figure turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving her alone in the warehouse with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear, this was far from over. Whatever secrets Mr. Grayson was hiding, they were bigger than she had ever imagined. And if she wanted to uncover the truth, she was going to have to be prepared for whatever came next. Because the deeper she dug, the more dangerous it would become. And the more dangerous it became, the more she realized that this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about something much bigger, something that could change everything. But for now, all she could do was wait. Wait and wonder what would happen next. And as she stood there in the dim light of the warehouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something much larger than herself. Something that would change her life forever. As Sarah left the warehouse that night, her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. The cryptic words of her former colleague echoed in her ears, each syllable adding weight to the growing storm of questions in her mind. What reason could Mr. Grayson possibly have had for firing her? What was he hiding? And why had this person risked so much to warn her? She replayed the conversation over and over, trying to piece together the fragments of information, but the puzzle only seemed to grow more complex. The drive home was a blur, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as she navigated the empty streets, her thoughts racing faster than the car. By the time she walked through her front door, exhaustion had begun to set in, but sleep was the last thing on her mind. She knew she couldn't rest, not until she had answers. And so, with a cup of coffee in hand, she sat down at her kitchen table, determined to make sense of the chaos. But just as she was about to dive into her own thoughts, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her best friend, Emily, someone who had been by her side through thick and thin. The message was short but urgent. "We need to talk. Can you come over?" Sarah's heart sank. Emily wasn't the type to send vague messages, and the tone of this one set off alarm bells in Sarah's mind. Without hesitation, she grabbed her keys and headed out the door, the weight of the night's events still pressing heavily on her shoulders. When she arrived at Emily's apartment, she found her friend pacing the living room, her face pale and her hands trembling. Before Sarah could even ask what was wrong, Emily blurted out the words that sent a chill down her spine. "I got a message too. Someone knows something, Sarah. Something about you, about the company, about everything. And I think we're in danger." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just about her anymore. Someone else was being dragged into this mess, someone she cared about deeply. Emily handed her phone to Sarah, and there, on the screen, was a message almost identical to the one Sarah had received. "You deserve to know the truth. Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street. Midnight. Come alone." The timing was too coincidental, the wording too similar to ignore. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting Sarah, they were targeting anyone connected to her. And that realization sent a wave of dread crashing over her. She had always been able to handle her own problems, but the thought of putting Emily in harm's way was unbearable. Yet, as much as she wanted to protect her friend, she knew they were in this together now. Whatever secrets were being unearthed, they were bigger than either of them had imagined. As the two women sat in Emily's dimly lit living room, trying to make sense of the situation, a new piece of the puzzle emerged. Emily revealed that she had been doing some digging of her own after Sarah's firing, unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She had reached out to a few former colleagues, asking subtle questions, trying to piece together what had really happened. And what she had uncovered was both shocking and unsettling. There were rumors of a secret project, one that Mr. Grayson had been overseeing in the months leading up to Sarah's dismissal. A project that involved large sums of money, shady deals, and a web of lies so intricate that no one seemed to know where it began or ended. But the most disturbing part? Sarah's name kept coming up in connection to it. Not as a participant, but as a potential threat. It was as if Mr. Grayson had seen her as a liability, someone who could expose the truth if she ever found out. And that realization hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. Had she been fired not because of budget cuts, but because she had unknowingly stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to know? The more they talked, the more the pieces began to fall into place, but not in a way that brought clarity. Instead, the mystery only deepened. If Mr. Grayson had been involved in something illegal or unethical, why had he targeted Sarah specifically? What had she seen or heard that made her a threat? And who else was involved? The questions multiplied, each one more troubling than the last. And then there was the matter of the messages. Who had sent them? Was it someone trying to help, Or was it a trap? The warehouse meeting had only raised more questions, and now, with Emily receiving a similar message, it was clear that this wasn't just about Sarah anymore. Someone was playing a dangerous game, and they were all pawns in it. As the night wore on, Sarah and Emily made a plan. They couldn't go to the police, not without more evidence, not without knowing who they could trust. And they couldn't ignore the messages, not when the stakes were so high. They decided to tread carefully, to gather as much information as they could before making their next move. But even as they talked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains, sent her heart racing. It was as if the walls were closing in, the shadows growing darker, the air thicker with tension. And then, just as they were about to call it a night, Emily's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a photo. A photo of Sarah, taken earlier that day, outside the cafe where she worked. The caption was simple, but it sent a wave of terror through both women. "We're watching. Be careful what you dig up." The room fell silent, the weight of the threat hanging heavily in the air. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the photo, her mind racing with possibilities. Who had taken it? How long had they been following her? And what did they want? The answers were out of reach, buried beneath layers of deception and danger. But one thing was clear, this was far from over. The stakes had just gotten higher, the risks greater, and the lines between friend and foe blurrier than ever. As Sarah and Emily sat there, grappling with the enormity of what they were facing, they knew they were standing on the edge of something much larger than themselves. Something that could destroy them or set them free. But for now, all they could do was wait. Wait and wonder what would happen next. And as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the sense of impending doom grew stronger, the shadows deeper, and the mystery more impenetrable than ever. Just when Sarah thought she was beginning to piece together the fragments of the mystery, the ground beneath her shifted in a way she could never have anticipated. It started with a phone call, a call from someone she hadn't heard from in years. The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost apologetic, but there was an urgency to it that made Sarah's stomach churn. It was Mark, her ex-husband and the father of her children, a man who had walked out of their lives without so much as a backward glance. His sudden reappearance was jarring, to say the least, but what he had to say was even more so. "Sarah, I know this is out of the blue, but I need to talk to you. It's about your job, about why you were fired. There's something you don't know, something I should have told you a long time ago." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication, and Sarah felt the room spin around her. What could Mark possibly know about her firing? And why was he reaching out now after all these years? The meeting with Mark was tense, to say the least. He looked different, older, more worn, but there was a sincerity in his eyes that Sarah hadn't seen in years. He didn't waste time with small talk or apologies. Instead, he got straight to the point. "Sarah, I wasn't honest with you when I left. I didn't just walk away because I couldn't handle being a father or a husband. I left because I was in trouble, deep trouble. I owed money to some dangerous people, and I didn't want you or the kids to get caught up in it. But before I left, I did something stupid. I took a job with a company, thinking it would help me pay off my debts. That company was yours." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Mark had worked for her company? How had she not known this? And what did it have to do with her firing? Mark continued, his voice trembling with regret. "I was hired as a contractor, working on a project that was supposed to be confidential. I didn't know much about it at the time, but I started to notice things that didn't add up. Money being moved around, documents being altered, people being paid off. I tried to ignore it, to just do my job and stay out of trouble. But then I found something. A file, hidden deep in the system. It had your name on it, Sarah. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process what Mark was saying. A file with her name on it. What could it possibly contain? Mark hesitated, as if he was afraid to say more, but he knew he had to. I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't want to know too much. But from what I saw, it was about you. About your work, your performance, your loyalty. It was like someone had been keeping tabs on you, documenting everything you did. And then, a few weeks before I left, I overheard a conversation. Mr. Grayson was talking to someone, I don't know who, and he mentioned your name. He said something about you being a loose end that needed to be dealt with. I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but now I think I do. Sarah felt a cold sweat break out on her skin. A loose end? What had she done to deserve that label? And why had Mr. Grayson seen her as a threat? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was more terrifying than she could have imagined. As Mark spoke, Sarah began to realize that her firing wasn't just about her. It was about something much bigger, something that had been brewing long before she ever set foot in that office. Mark's involvement added a new layer of complexity to the mystery, one that made her question everything she thought she knew. Had she been set up from the beginning? Had her entire career at the company been a facade, a way to keep her close while someone worked behind the scenes to destroy her? The thought was almost too much to bear, but she couldn't afford to fall apart now. She needed answers, and Mark was the only one who could give them to her. "What else do you know?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark shook his head, his expression grim. "Not much. After I overheard that conversation, I knew I had to get out. I deleted the file, wiped my computer, and left before anyone could figure out what I'd seen. But I always knew this day would come. I just didn't think it would involve you." The revelation left Sarah reeling. All this time, she had been focused on Mr. Grayson, on the company, on the messages and the threats. But now, it seemed like the roots of the mystery went much deeper, tangled in a web of deceit that involved people she had once trusted. Mark's confession changed everything. It wasn't just about corporate greed or personal vendettas. It was about secrets, lies, and the lengths people would go to protect them. And Sarah was right in the middle of it, whether she liked it or not. As she sat there, trying to make sense of it all, one question burned in her mind. Who else was involved? Who had been watching her, documenting her every move, and why? The answers were out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. But the closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. And as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Sarah realized that this wasn't just a fight for her job or her reputation, it was a fight for her life. But just when she thought she had a handle on the situation, another bombshell dropped. Emily called, her voice shaking with fear and disbelief. "Sarah, you need to see this. I just got an anonymous email. It's a video, and I think you need to watch it." Sarah's heart pounded as she opened the attachment, her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold her phone. The video was grainy, the audio muffled, but the scene was unmistakable. It was Mr. Grayson, sitting in his office, talking to someone off camera. His words were chilling. She knows too much. If she starts digging, it's over for all of us. We need to shut her down permanently. The screen went black, but the impact of those words lingered, sending a wave of terror through Sarah. This wasn't just about her job anymore. This was about survival. And as she sat there, staring at the blank screen, she knew one thing for certain: the game had just changed. And she was no longer the hunter, she was the prey. Sarah's world was unraveling faster than she could keep up. The video Emily had sent her played on a loop in her mind, Mr. Grayson's cold, calculated words echoing like a death knell. We need to shut her down permanently. The threat was no longer abstract. It was real, immediate, and terrifying. But as much as Sarah wanted to curl up and hide, she knew she couldn't. Her kids depended on her. Emily depended on her. And now, with Mark's shocking revelation, she realized that this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about exposing a truth so dark, so dangerous, that it could destroy lives, including her own. But how far was she willing to go to uncover it? And who could she trust when everyone around her seemed to have their own secrets? The first impossible choice came sooner than she expected. Mark had begged her to let him help, to make up for the years he'd been absent and the role he'd played in this mess. But trusting him felt like a gamble. He had walked out on her once before, leaving her to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Could she really rely on him now when the stakes were so high? Yet, as she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: genuine remorse. He was scared, not just for himself, but for her and their children. And while that didn't erase the pain he'd caused, it made her wonder if he might be the only person who truly understood the gravity of the situation. Still, trusting him meant opening herself up to the possibility of betrayal all over again. Was she willing to take that risk? The second choice was even harder. Emily, her best friend and confidant, had been by her side through every step of this nightmare. But as they dug deeper into the mystery, Sarah began to notice small inconsistencies in Emily's behavior, a hesitation here, a nervous glance there. At first, she chalked it up to the stress of the situation, but then she remembered something. Emily had been the one to introduce her to the job at the company all those years ago. She had been the one who had vouched for her, who had helped her climb the ranks. And now, as Sarah thought back, she realized that Emily had always been unusually close to Mr. Grayson, always quick to defend him when others criticized his harsh management style. Was it possible that Emily had known more than she was letting on? The thought was like a knife to the heart, but Sarah couldn't ignore it. She needed to confront Emily, to ask the hard questions, even if it meant risking their friendship. But how do you accuse someone you love of betraying you? And what if you're wrong? The tension between Sarah and Emily came to a head one evening when Sarah decided to broach the subject. They were sitting in Emily's apartment, the air thick with unspoken words, when Sarah finally found the courage to speak. Emily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you know about the file? About Mr. Grayson? About any of this? Emily's face went pale, her hands trembling as she set down her coffee cup. For a moment, she said nothing, and the silence was deafening. Then, with a heavy sigh, she began to speak. Sarah, I didn't know everything, but I knew enough to be scared. Mr. Grayson, he's not who you think he is. He's connected to people, dangerous people. And when I realized what was going on, I tried to warn you, but I didn't know how. I was afraid of what might happen if I said too much. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. Emily had known. All this time, she had known, and she hadn't told her. The betrayal cut deep, but so did the realization that Emily had been trying to protect her in her own way. It didn't make the hurt any less real, but it added a layer of complexity to the situation that Sarah hadn't anticipated. The third choice was the most agonizing of all. Late one night, Sarah received another anonymous message, this one more direct than the others. It contained an address, a time, and a chilling ultimatum: come alone, or the truth dies with you. The message was clear. Someone wanted to meet her, and they weren't giving her a choice. But going alone meant walking into the unknown, potentially putting herself in danger. Bringing someone with her, on the other hand, could mean losing the chance to uncover the truth forever. It was a gamble, one that could cost her everything. But as she sat there, staring at the message, she realized that she had no other option. She had come too far to turn back now. The truth was out there, waiting for her, and she owed it to herself and to everyone else who had been hurt by this to find it. The night of the meeting was cold and dark, the kind of night that made you feel like the world was holding its breath. Sarah drove to the address with her heart in her throat, every nerve in her body on edge. The location was an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, its broken windows and crumbling walls casting eerie shadows in the moonlight. As she stepped out of her car, she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. This was it. The moment of truth. But as she approached the entrance, she heard a noise behind her, a soft footstep, the rustle of fabric. She turned, her breath catching in her throat, and there, standing in the shadows, was a figure she recognized. It was someone she had never expected to see, someone who shouldn't have been there. And in that moment, everything she thought she knew was turned upside down. The figure stepped into the light, and Sarah's world shattered. It was someone she had trusted implicitly, someone she had never suspected of being involved. Their expression was a mix of guilt and desperation, and as they began to speak, Sarah felt the ground beneath her feet give way. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I never wanted it to come to this. But you left me no choice." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and Sarah realized that she had been wrong about everything. The betrayal was deeper, more personal than she could have ever imagined. And as she stood there, facing the person she had once called a friend, she knew that the choices she made next would define not just her future, but the future of everyone involved. But before she could respond, before she could even process what was happening, a noise echoed through the factory, a loud metallic clang that sent a jolt of fear through her body. The figure's eyes widened in panic, and they grabbed her arm, pulling her into the shadows. "We need to go. Now." Sarah didn't argue. She didn't have the luxury of time or the clarity of thought. All she knew was that the game had changed again, and the stakes were higher than ever. As they ran through the darkened factory, the sound of footsteps closing in behind them, Sarah realized that this was no longer just about uncovering the truth. It was about survival. And as the walls closed in around her, she knew one thing for certain. The choices she made in the next few moments would determine whether she lived to see the truth or died trying. Sarah's heart pounded as she and the figure now revealed to be someone she had once trusted with her life darted through the labyrinthine corridors of the abandoned factory. The footsteps behind them grew louder, more urgent, and the air was thick with the scent of rust and decay. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. The person gripping her arm, "Let's call them," Alex whispered harshly. "We can't stop. Not now. If they catch us, it's over." Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos. Alex had been her ally, her confidant, the one person she thought she could rely on. But the look in their eyes, the desperation in their voice, told a different story. Something had shifted, and Sarah wasn't sure if Alex was trying to save her or lead her into a trap. As they rounded a corner, Alex suddenly stopped, pulling Sarah into a narrow alcove. Their breathing was ragged, their face pale under the dim light filtering through a cracked window. "Listen to me," Alex said, their voice low and urgent. "This isn't just about you. It's bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than anyone realized. Mr. Grayson, he's just a pawn. There are people above him, powerful people, who've been pulling the strings this whole time. And you stumbled into something you were never supposed to see." Sarah's stomach churned. She had always suspected there was more to her firing than met the eye, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "What did I stumble into?" Alex hesitated, their eyes darting toward the sound of approaching footsteps. "There's no time to explain everything. But you need to know this. The file Mark found, it wasn't just about you. It was about everyone who's ever worked at that company. They've been watching us, Sarah. All of us. And if we don't stop them, more people are going to get hurt." The weight of Alex's words hit Sarah like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just about her job or her reputation. This was about a conspiracy that spanned years, involving countless lives. And she had unknowingly become a threat to it. But before she could process the enormity of it all, Alex grabbed her arm again, pulling her deeper into the factory. "We need to move. There's a way out, but we have to get there before they do." Sarah followed, her mind reeling. Who were they? How many people were involved? And why had Alex waited until now to tell her the truth? The questions swirled in her head, but there was no time to ask them. The danger was too close, the stakes too high. As they navigated the maze of crumbling walls and rusted machinery, Sarah's thoughts turned to Emily. Had she known about this too? Was that why she had been so hesitant to share what she knew? And what about Mark? He had been desperate to help, but was he truly on her side, or was he just trying to save himself? The lines between friend and foe were blurring, and Sarah didn't know who to trust anymore. Every person she had relied on seemed to have their own agenda, their own secrets. And now, with Alex's revelation, she realized that the conspiracy went far beyond the walls of the company. It was a web of lies and corruption, and she was caught right in the middle of it. The sound of voices echoed through the factory, sharp and commanding. Sarah's blood ran cold. They were close, too close. Alex pushed her behind a stack of crates, their eyes wide with fear. "Stay here," they whispered. "I'll draw them away. When it's clear, head for the loading dock. There's a car waiting. Get in and don't look back." Sarah shook her head, panic rising in her chest. "No, I'm not leaving you." Alex's expression softened, just for a moment. "You have to. This is bigger than both of us now. And if they catch you, they didn't finish the sentence. They didn't need to." The look in their eyes said it all. Before Sarah could protest further, Alex stepped out into the open, their voice ringing out in the empty space. "Over here. You want me? Come and get me." The footsteps quickened, the voices growing louder, and Sarah watched in horror as Alex disappeared around a corner, leading their pursuers away. Her heart ached with a mix of fear and gratitude. Alex had sacrificed themselves to give her a chance, but at what cost? She wanted to follow, to help, but Alex's words echoed in her mind. "This is bigger than both of us." Clenching her fists, she forced herself to move, to focus on the task at hand. The loading dock. The car. Escape. As she crept through the shadows, her mind raced with questions. Who was waiting for her at the loading dock? Was it another ally Or was it another trap? And what would she do if she made it out? She couldn't just run away. Not now. Not when she knew the truth. But exposing the conspiracy would mean putting herself in even greater danger. It was an impossible choice, one that weighed heavily on her shoulders as she finally reached the loading dock. The door was ajar, moonlight spilling through the crack. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open and stepped outside. The car was there, just as Alex had promised. But the person standing beside it was the last person she expected to see. It was Emily, her best friend, the one she had doubted, the one she had accused of betrayal. Emily's face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she held out a set of keys. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," she whispered. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to stop it. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to let them hurt you." Sarah stared at her, a flood of emotions crashing over her: relief, anger, confusion. But before she could say anything, the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. They were out of time. Emily grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the car. "Get in. We need to go. Now!" Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting back toward the factory. But Emily cut her off, her voice firm. "Alex knew the risks. And so do we. If we don't leave now, none of this will matter." The urgency in her tone broke through Sarah's hesitation. She climbed into the passenger seat, her mind spinning as Emily started the engine and sped away from the factory. The night air was cool against her skin, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside her. As they drove, Emily began to explain. "I didn't know how deep this went, Sarah. I swear. I thought it was just Mr. Grayson, just the company. But when I started digging, I realized it was so much bigger. There are people in power, politicians, executives, even law enforcement who are involved. And they'll do anything to protect their secrets. That's why I couldn't tell you everything. I was trying to protect you." Sarah listened, her heart heavy with the weight of Emily's words. She wanted to be angry, to demand answers, but she could see the fear in Emily's eyes, the guilt etched into her face. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival. The car sped through the empty streets, the city lights blurring into a haze of color. Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the conspiracy. But one thing was clear: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The people behind this, whoever they were, would stop at nothing to silence her. And if she wanted to expose the truth, she would have to be smarter, stronger, and more determined than ever. But as she looked at Emily, at the tears streaming down her face, she realized she wasn't alone. They were in this together now. And together, they might just have a chance. But as the car turned onto a deserted road, headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter with every passing second. Emily's hands tightened on the wheel, her knuckles white. "They found us," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engine. Sarah's heart sank. The danger was closer than ever, the stakes higher than she could have imagined. And as the headlights grew closer, she knew one thing for certain: the fight was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The headlights behind them grew blinding, their beams cutting through the darkness like knives. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her fingers turned white, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the urgency of their situation. The car sped down the deserted road, the engine roaring as Emily pushed it to its limits. But no matter how fast they went, the headlights behind them only seemed to grow closer, more menacing. Sarah's mind raced, trying to think of a way out, but the options were slim. They were trapped, hunted, and running out of time. We can't outrun them, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. We need a plan. Emily glanced at her, her eyes wide with desperation. What plan? There's nowhere to go. Sarah clenched her fists, her mind racing. She thought of Alex, of the sacrifice they had made to give her a chance. She thought of Mark, of the secrets he had uncovered and the danger he had tried to warn her about. And she thought of her kids, waiting for her at home, unaware of the storm their mother was caught in. She couldn't let it end like this. She wouldn't. Pull over, Sarah said suddenly, her voice firm. Emily stared at her in disbelief. Are you crazy? They'll kill us. Sarah shook her head, her eyes locked on the road ahead. No. They want me. If I can buy us some time, you can get away. Find help. Expose the truth. Emily's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm not leaving you, Sarah. Not again. Sarah reached over, gripping Emily's hand tightly. You have to. This is bigger than us now. You're the only one who can finish this. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Emily hesitated, her hands trembling on the wheel, but finally she nodded. Okay. But I'm coming back for you. I swear. The car screeched to a halt on the side of the road, dust swirling in the headlights. Sarah jumped out, her legs shaking but her resolve unbreakable. She turned to Emily, her best friend, the person she had doubted but now trusted with her life. Go. Now. Emily hesitated for a moment, her eyes filled with fear and determination, before speeding off into the night. Sarah watched the taillights disappear, her heart aching with the weight of what she was about to do. But there was no time to second-guess herself. The headlights behind her were closing in, and she had to act fast. She ran into the woods, the trees closing in around her like a protective shield. The ground was uneven, the darkness almost impenetrable, but she pushed forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The sound of car doors slamming echoed behind her, followed by voices harsh, commanding, and filled with menace. They were coming for her. She could hear their footsteps crunching on the dry leaves, their voices growing louder as they closed in. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way out. But there was no way out. Not this time. She stumbled into a small clearing, the moonlight casting an eerie glow over the scene. And there, standing in the center, was Mr. Grayson. His face was a mask of cold indifference, his eyes glinting with a malice that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. Behind him stood several men, their faces obscured by shadows, their presence menacing. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The moment she had been dreading, the moment she had been running from. But she couldn't run anymore. She had to face him. Sarah, Mr. Grayson said, his voice smooth and dripping with false charm. You've been quite the thorn in my side. But I must admit, I'm impressed. You've lasted longer than I expected. Sarah straightened, her chin lifted in defiance. You're not going to get away with this, Grayson. The truth will come out. He chuckled, a low, humorless sound that sent a chill through the air. The truth? The truth is whatever I say it is. And right now, the truth is that you're a disgruntled former employee who went off the deep end. Tragic, really. Sarah's fists clenched at her sides, her anger boiling over. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. People know. They're coming for you. Mr. Grayson's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. You're right, Sarah. People do know. But not the people you think. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You see, This isn't just about me. It's about power, control. And you were never supposed to be a part of it. But you couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. What was he talking about? Who else was involved? But before she could ask, Mr. Grayson pulled something from his coat, a small, sleek device that glinted in the moonlight. A phone. He held it up, his thumb hovering over the screen. You want the truth, Sarah? Here it is. He pressed a button, and the screen lit up, displaying a video. Sarah's breath caught as she recognized the faces on the screen, people she had trusted, people she had never suspected. Emily, Mark, even Alex. They were all there, their voices calm and measured as they discussed the conspiracy, their roles in it, and the lengths they had gone to keep it hidden. Sarah's heart shattered as the truth crashed over her like a tidal wave. They had all been lying to her. Every single one of them. The betrayal was so deep, so complete, that it left her numb. Mr. Grayson smirked, clearly enjoying her devastation, you see. Sarah, you were never the hero of this story. You were just a pawn. And now, it's time to take you off the board. He nodded to the men behind him, and they stepped forward, their intentions clear. Sarah's mind raced, her body frozen. In place. She had no weapons, no way to fight back. But as the men closed in, something inside her snapped. She wasn't going down without a fight. With a surge of adrenaline, she lunged at Mr. Grayson, her hands clawing at the phone. He stumbled back, caught off guard by her sudden attack, and the phone fell to the ground. Sarah grabbed it, her fingers fumbling as she tried to stop the video, to delete it, to do anything. But before she could, one of the men grabbed her, his grip like iron. She struggled, kicking and screaming, but it was no use. They were too strong. Mr. Grayson straightened his coat, his expression cold and unyielding. Enough of this. Take her. The men began to drag her away, but just as they reached the edge of the clearing, a voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Let her go. Sarah's head snapped up, her heart leaping with hope. It was Emily. She stood at the edge of the clearing, her face pale but determined, a gun in her hand. Behind her were several police officers, their weapons drawn and their expressions grim. Mr. Grayson's smirk faltered, his confidence wavering for the first time. You're too late, he said, his voice tight with anger. It's over. Emily shook her head, her eyes blazing with defiance. No, it's just beginning. The police moved in, their voices loud and authoritative as they ordered Mr. Grayson and his men to surrender. For a moment, it seemed like they might resist, but then Mr. Grayson raised his hands, his face a mask of cold fury. This isn't over, he said, his eyes locking on Sarah's. You'll regret this. As the police handcuffed him and led him away, Sarah collapsed to her knees, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Emily rushed to her side, pulling her into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry, Sarah, she whispered, her voice choked with tears. I didn't know how to tell you, but I couldn't let him win. Not after everything. Sarah clung to her, her mind still reeling from the betrayal, the danger, and the sheer magnitude of what had just happened. But as she looked at Emily, at the police, at the evidence they had gathered, she realized that they had done it. They had exposed the truth. But just as she thought it was over, one of the police officers approached, his expression grim. We found something, he said, holding up a file. It's a list. Names, dates, transactions. This goes higher than we thought. Much higher. Sarah's heart sank as she realized the fight was far from over. The conspiracy was bigger than she had ever imagined, and the people involved would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. But as she looked at Emily, at the determination in her eyes, she knew they couldn't give up. They had come too far to turn back now. The final twist came as they were leaving the clearing. One of the police officers pulled Sarah aside, his voice low and urgent. "There's something you need to know," he said. "The person who tipped us off, it wasn't Emily. It was someone else. Someone who's been watching you this whole time." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Who?" The officer hesitated, then handed her a note. On it was a single name, written in familiar handwriting. A name she never expected to see. A name that changed everything. The screen faded to black, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, desperate to know what happened next. The story wasn't over. Not yet. And the final twist was just the beginning of a new chapter 1 that would change everything. The days that followed were a blur of police investigations, media coverage, and sleepless nights. Sarah's life had become a whirlwind of chaos, but amidst the storm, there was a glimmer of hope. The list of names the police had found was a bombshell, implicating not just Mr. Grayson but a network of powerful individuals, politicians, executives, even law enforcement officers who had been operating in the shadows for years. The conspiracy was far bigger than Sarah had ever imagined, and the fallout was seismic. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, their headlines screaming about corruption, betrayal, and the brave whistleblowers who had brought it all to light. But for Sarah, the victory felt hollow. The truth had come at a cost, and the scars it left behind would take time to heal. Emily had been by her side through it all, her guilt and remorse evident in every word and gesture. She had confessed everything to Sarah, how she had been coerced into keeping quiet, how she had been manipulated into playing a role in the conspiracy, and how she had ultimately found the courage to do the right thing. It wasn't an easy conversation, and the betrayal still stung, but Sarah knew that Emily had risked everything to help her. In the end, their friendship had survived, battered but unbroken. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their bond forged in the fires of adversity.